Hi, it's Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of the Reimagine podcast. Laura, how are you?
I'm doing well, Paul. It's great to be back.
Great to be back, and we actually was physically back in our offices this week, which is a little weird, and a lot of people without masks, and I guess it just shows you how the world changes so quickly every 10 days. So tell us, we've got a great guest. Do you want to sort of set it up, and then I'll kind of jump in at appropriate times to celebrate our illustrious school background?
Absolutely. So with us today, we have Justin Zhen, co-founder of Thinknum. Justin comes for us through a connection, actually a shared connection of Ramsey Smith, and I'll let Paul go into that a little bit later on with that piece of it. But, Justin, why don't we start out with having you talk to the listeners a little bit about your company and how did you get started and a little bit about your story?
Sure. So I studied finance in college at Princeton. Wanted to do finance as a career. I was more on the quantitative side, so I majored in financial engineering. And then I graduated 2010, which was a pretty bad year to find a job. But I was fortunate enough to get a job at a small hedge fund, a small quant fund. So I did that for basically 3.5 years. And when I was at the fund, we came across this problem where we were trying to retrieve data from the web. And a lot of my earlier classmates had gone into finance and realized that everyone else was trying to get the same data. Everyone's trying to build technology to get data from the public web and trade off of it. So I caught up with a friend from college, Greg Ugri, and he was working at Goldman, and we both thought, hey, if there's a lot of demand for this kind of data, it doesn't make sense for every hedge fund and bank and insurance company to get the same data. It makes sense for someone to do it and do it well. So that was 6.5 years ago, and here we are today.
Yeah, it's interesting, different paths people take to get to where they are. We found your company very interesting because, as you know, insurance companies, especially over the last year, and on the life insurance side, have struggled to get, data they need to underwrite life insurance properly. I know auto insurance and pricing has been turned on its head because, on one hand, we had fewer drivers and insurance companies that said, hey, we're never going to do this usage-based insurance, got forced there. Traditional data they used would have said, oh, because traffic's down, accidents aren't going to happen, when in fact mortality went way up. So the number of collisions went down, but the incidents went up. Now, the data is fascinating. Why? What kind of data sets? I know it on the property and casualty side, I've seen massive rush to use new data sets to better price. On the life insurance side, it's interesting. Just like Laura, I don't know if you saw. Laura was actually telling me this. She said, "I read, Paul. I was reading the NAIC reports this week, and I found they came up with controversially came up with a definition of accelerated underwriting. Justin, and this was a description of using conscious and unconsciously provided data by individuals. Scary enough to get under life insurance, but now what are you using to use my data? What does this look like with this alternative data? So, is this going to be are new data sources popping up? Are they being regulated? Are they? Tell us over the last 12 months, how's the landscape changed?
Yeah, sure. So alternative data is an industry that's growing very quickly. It's growing about 40% year over year. It's projected to be a $7 billion industry in 5 years. So alternative data, the landscape consists of a couple of different data sets, right? There's data sets that track where you spend your money. There's data sets that track your email. It's usually aggregated, so I can see are people purchasing more from Best Buy versus Amazon. there's data sets that track like satellites, right? So they can see how many cars are in a parking lot, or how big a certain crop field is. The part that the source for our data is the web, and the applications for insurance are numerous, right? You talked about property and casualty. Well, we can track things like how property pricing is changing every single day. So traditionally, you get this data on a huge lag. Could be weeks, could be months, but thanks to the web, because the developers are listing properties on the web, they can change their prices more quickly, and we can track that data. You talked about, but that's like business, right? We can track which companies are growing. If you underwrite the business insurance and this company has been laying off a lot of people recently, that's something you may want to know about. And then on the personal level, there's all kinds of different data sets, but I think like mapping an individual to the company that he works for, if I know that this individual is working for a company that looks like it might go bankrupt very soon, and you're an insurance company, then I may want to know that. So the use cases are really endless.
Yeah, I saw a startup in Baltimore, this must have been 7 or 8 years ago, that had gone out and created a data set of restaurant inspection records. It's interesting because, and it was a lot of work apparently, because some cities exposed them, some didn't. It was all at a local level. Consume the data. Great. What do you do with this? Now, I would just use it to sway people from going to certain restaurants. But it's interesting now. COVID strikes. Wow. Wait a second. How clean is this place? Are they really good in standard? Maybe this actually does impact my life more. How many different types of alternative data sets, or can you give us examples of data sets that weren't so valuable a year ago, but they are today?
Yeah, there's really so many, right? So what you're really seeing is business activity coming online. So I think during COVID especially, many companies that did not have a web presence, they have a web presence, right? So you mentioned restaurants. There's restaurants that used to, not have any food delivery. In order to survive through COVID, they have to sell food via food delivery, and to do that, they have to have a web presence, right? So now there's data for us to index. There's things like Internet of Things, right? People are tracking where they are, what their heart rate is, how much they walked every day. So that's data that can now be packaged and resold on an aggregate level. I think it's a combination of just the web growing, Internet of Things, and then even things like just people using more apps on mobile. That's creating just more and more sources for this kind of data to be captured.
Have you ever come across a data set that you were unable to find on the web?
Yeah, there's so many. So I talked about like satellite data. That's a very different type of data set, right? You have to send physical satellites and you have to take snapshots. That's not on the web at all. Obviously, companies have their own internal data, right? So like hardcore B2B can be tricky, right? Like if somebody wanted to know who our customers were, we wouldn't put that out on the web, so they wouldn't know that. So there's quite a lot of data that's not on the web. However, we think that the web is still the biggest source for alternative data. There's more than enough work for us to do there, right? And it's only growing. You're seeing very traditional industries come online. Companies are starting to sell drugs online soon, so now we can capture things like transactions and pricing. You see heavy machinery or construction companies, now they sell equipment online. They used to not do that. So the web is a really big place, but the world of alternative data is even bigger.
Where, I guess, now, where do you get the data? Is you are building data sets yourself? Are you outsourcing or creating a market for companies with data sets? What exactly is your company focused on doing in this arena?
Yeah, we build the data sets ourselves. So the analogy I like to use to explain it is, imagine if you had a team of, let's say, a billion monkeys, and you could train these monkeys to download the internet and find out specific parts, like specific information for you, and store it somewhere, right? Like, what could you do with that? Well, instead of monkeys, we have technology. So just like any human, you can go to a website and jot down one number. You can't do that with billions of data points that are changing every second, but technology can do that.
I have quite the visual from that. I kind of want a team of monkeys to help me do my day job. I think that would be amazing. So talk a little bit about the team, because it sounds like you're doing a lot of amazing work, and it must take a strong team to help back this up.
Yeah, sure. So we have a team of 37 people. It's broken into roughly three divisions. So one is engineering, one is sales, and one is marketing. We used to be very engineering heavy, but in recent years we've become more sales and marketing heavy. Our engineers are pretty, they come from extremely impressive backgrounds. We believe that by building a culture of what they call 10x engineers, so that's the engineer that can produce the output of 10 regular engineers, that's like a super engineer. If you can hire a team of those, which I'm fortunate to have, then, and you're building a technology company, then you can do anything. And then on the sales and marketing side, we've built a product that we scale to. We have over 300 corporate clients we work with today. So, there's a few thousand corporate clients that could benefit from our data, but they don't quite know it yet. So, more recently, we've been focused on sales and marketing to just educate them on what the use cases are. And yeah, we spend a lot of time educating. It's a very new field. No one else has done this before. There's no textbooks on how to use alternative data, so we have to, spend time with our clients and educate them on how they can become smarter.
Okay, so this is interesting. Who are the best users of alternative data? Now, my head would jump to hedge funds.
Yep, hedge funds. Hedge funds is a good one. So for the first like 3 years that our product was out, we only sold to hedge funds because it didn't make sense to, stretch yourself too thin. But yeah, hedge funds. The reason why hedge funds are great users is because finance and the markets are just so competitive. If someone else knows something about a company that you don't, they just have an edge on you. And hedge funds are pretty innovative, so they're a great market. So they were a great initial market. I think another market that we've been very successful at penetrating is corporates, especially tech companies. Like big tech companies, they build data teams over the past years, and they use our data not to invest in markets, obviously, but they want to track the competitors. They want to see who the competitors are hiring, or they want to see how much their competitors' products cost. There's a lot of also human resource applications. I can see, like how my competitors are wording certain jobs, so I can out recruit them. But that's really a market that I'm very excited about because there's obviously so many more corporations than hedge funds.
Can you talk a little bit about how VCs are using alternative data?
Yeah, VCs is a newer market that we've gone into over the last 2 years. A big part of that is just sourcing, right? So they can use alternative data to identify startups, companies that are growing quickly. Because in VC markets, there's no stock prices, right? So I don't know who's doing well without actually calling them and asking them, hey, how much money are you guys making, right? But I can use alternative data as a pretty good proxy, so I can focus on companies that I want to talk to sooner, right? So it's all about talking to the right company sooner, who gets, and then they use this data to really win deals. So mostly sourcing.
Interesting. And you mentioned there were customers that you're educating who probably don't know. Who's the next frontier? Or if you could just sort of describe the market sector, those who, if they had a little more education, they'd say, aha, I'm going to use this.
Yeah, so the next frontier is quite big, right? So right now, the people who use alternative data are extremely innovative, extremely smart, relatively savvy, right? That's obviously a very small part of most companies out there. The next frontier is really the remainder of these companies, right? I mean, by sector, obviously insurance is a big one. There's a handful of insurance companies that are starting to use this. Real estate is a big one. There's just a lot of real estate data that's public, and then just like certain like industries. Auto manufacturers, right? If I can track how many cars my competitors are selling, because each car you can actually there's like a VIN number that's unique to that car, so I can literally know when a car is sold. Healthcare I talked about, right? Pharmaceutical. It's really anyone that has a use case for understanding their competitive landscape. And also for lead generation, it's something that I didn't talk about, but I can use alternative data similar to VCs who want to identify fast-growing startups. If I sell something to any company, right, then I can use alternative data to get like leads and sell more.
So let me give you a couple cases. So I've got a financial planning organization in the New York area, and I specialize in helping people plan, plan their retirement. And I like to know people who are getting laid off and help them make the transition from a company 401k to another one. Can you identify companies that are shrinking?
Yes. So you can track LinkedIn and job listings. And I can say, these are the companies that are shrinking the most. And then once you have that short list, I can then, go on LinkedIn and actually contact the people individually. But yes.
Yeah, and it's similar. I think if I'm a commercial broker, you'd be able to tell me the businesses that are growing that might, need different types of insurance, correct?
Yeah, I can find out who's growing. I can also track things like for commercial brokers, we can track listings, right? So I can see if an individual listing has been on the market for too long, and now I can set an alert and say I want a list of the listings that have been listed for 6 months and they're still listed. So maybe they want to switch brokers.
Justin, I'm curious. What is your why? What drives the passion for alternative data sets and what you do?
So ultimately, the reason why we were super drawn to the opportunity is because we're not just building any software company. The most important problem that society has to solve is how to allocate resources, right? By helping, let's say hedge funds invest better, we can help them put more capital in companies that deserve it, and short or take capital out of companies who don't deserve it, right? VC is the same thing. If VCs invest in the wrong companies, that is very damaging to not just them but to society at large, right? The entire kind of ecosystem crumbles. If companies can get smarter about where they invest, about where they want to open a store, if they can get smarter about how they hire, then that just makes it so much more efficient. And then there's like the issue of governments, right? So right now our government data is being released on a pretty big lag. If we can use alternative data to help them predict inflation better or to help them predict unemployment better, then there's just they can produce better policies. So how society allocates resources, that's really what alternative data can do, and it's game changing.
What do you think the future is with using alternative data and potential regulatory change? And just to set this up, for us to underwrite a life insurance policy, there are very strict laws about what we can and can't use. In fact, to the point where, if you go to 23andMe, you may know more about your longevity risk than I will as an insurance company after you've signed your list. It's very restrictive. Can't use certain things. Same thing on personal lines auto insurance. The positive of the data is that you could actually you should be able to give me an efficient offer on risk. However, the flip side is a lot of these protections are in place to prevent unfair discrimination, redlining, et cetera. How do we? How does alternative data steal some words from the old, at least the old Google culture. So you don't do evil. You're only doing good with alternative data.
Yeah, I mean, the data that we track is completely public, right? So we just help you become more efficient instead of going to a website and writing down something a billion times, which is obviously not possible. You can come to us and we'll
Yeah.
give you the results. I think what you're touching at is there's some alternative data sets that might be, it might infringe on privacy and things like that. They don't really apply to us exactly, but I think, as speaking of the industry as a whole, I think that's up to the user. I think there's likely going to be some regulation coming where it says certain alternative data sets are might be too intrusive, or maybe they're rude, non-intrusive. But again, that doesn't have anything to do with our business. But it's up to the user to decide what they find is appropriate.
Here's another question: Who should own this data? Right? Like, wow, you collected my data, but like, wait a second, I created this, and you've pulled this off, and you're now monetizing this. Do you see the tide ever turning where the U.S. starts to operate more like the EU at least is headed?
So I mean, for us, we're collecting completely public data. So
Yeah.
the analogy is, if I have a sign, if you're a shopkeeper and you have a sign on the sidewalk that has your menu and the pricing, I'm walking by on the street and I'm jotting down the prices. So I'm allowed to do that. Now, if I'm walking into your store and
Right.
if I'm walking into your store and you don't want me in your store, and I start, let's say, talking to all your customers, then that's totally different. But
Right.
for us, we're dealing with completely public data. We're just we're not even logging in, like we're not talking to anyone. We're just writing down numbers on signs.
Yeah. What's the calculation? How do you think about the ROI of building a data set? Are you building these on spec? Are you building them based on real customers coming to you and say, look, here, can you find this person for me or these people?
Yeah, so we try not to do too much, so we try not to do like any consulting really, right? Because then you end up just consulting for a lot of big companies, which is probably more it could be more lucrative, but I think it's not really useful for our vision, which is to build literally a database of all the public information that can be useful for business. So a lot of it is actually done programmatically. We have crawlers that go out, aka this team of monkeys, and we say, hey, these are data points we find. These are companies that are growing. Can they fit somewhere into our database? In many cases, we would throw out a lot of things. So we'll see, let's say, pictures of cats, right? Not really useful. So we'll throw it out. But sometimes we'll see things like here's a job listing for Coca-Cola. So that's useful for our database. So we should use that metric. So it's mostly automatic.
If you had to estimate or take a guess, say 3 years down the line, what percentage of increase in usage of alternative data do you think we'll see large scale across all industry?
Right now it's probably less than 5%. Like I mentioned, it's the most innovative, what I like to say, smartest corporations. 3 years down the line, I think it's growing at 40% year over year. So we're looking at like 20%, right? So it takes a while for a trend for it's almost like a revolution to take place. But it's growing 40% year over year. That's extremely fast for anything to be adopted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, let's see. If people want to, Justin, first of all, thanks for your time, and it's great always to have a Princeton grad on, recommended by another Princeton grad, Ramsey Smith, who's, we're actively working with in the annuity world. What's the best way for people to find you or find the company?
Sure. Best way is to go to thinknum.com. So like think numbers, thinknum.com, and they can leave a demo request, and someone will reach out and give them a personalized demo for their use case.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and your time with us today. And we'll be sure to definitely share in the notes as well additional ways for people to get in touch.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Thanks all of you for listening.